At exactly 30 seconds in, the screen ripped open with the sound of glass shattering, like democracy itself had been dropped from a skyscraper. Headlines detonated across the background. $10 million in questionable campaign funds. 500 families left without health care. Veterans abandoned with unpaid bills. The imagery was violent, as if truth itself had been carved out of the nation's flesh and left bleeding on the floor. And in the center of the wreckage, one man's voice tried to rise above the carnage. Donald Trump, smirking as if denial were armor, leaned into a microphone and snarled, "We're going to silence Barack Obama once and for all." But what happens when the man you try to silence speaks with evidence instead of noise? The camera cut to the chamber, a space that seemed to breathe as if alive. The air bled with menace, heavy and thick like it carried 1,000 unsaid confessions. The walls whispered secrets in the pauses between coughs, and even the wooden table seemed to lean closer, eager to taste the storm. Obama walked in, his pace unhurried, his calm the sharpest weapon in the room. He took his seat opposite Trump, whose fists rested too tightly on the desk, knuckles pale, sweat beginning to whisper its own testimony. The silence was surgical, cutting deeper than shouting ever could. Trump twitched, his voice booming too loud for the small chamber. "You've had your turn, now it's mine. This nation doesn't need your lectures." He wanted dominance, but the echo betrayed him, bouncing back against the marble, exposing desperation. Obama's eyes didn't move, his breathing precise, his hands folded in stillness that looked like strategy. Around them, families gathered in homes across the country, televisions flickering like watchtowers. In Pittsburgh, a mother named Janine held her son's hospital bills, nearly $50,000 unpaid, because promised benefits never arrived. In Arizona, 80-year-old veteran Leonard stared at his empty fridge, remembering the promise of funding that vanished into campaign coffers. Their names hummed beneath the conversation, though neither man spoke them yet, as if the walls themselves were holding back a scream. Trump leaned in, his grin stretched too wide. "You think facts make you strong? Facts are boring. People want fire." His words dripped with bravado, but the room itself seemed to recoil, the fluorescent lights flickering and warning. Obama waited a beat longer than comfortable, then spoke in a voice so calm it sliced deeper than any roar. "Truth doesn't need your permission to exist." The line detonated across screens. Social media feeds lit up like wildfire. Phrases clipped, repeated, shared. College students scribbled it in notebooks. A grandmother in Detroit whispered it to her granddaughter. Trump's jaw tightened, his shoulders shifting like a fighter hit in the ribs. And yet, he pressed on. "You think you're untouchable? You think paper matters?" His fist slammed the desk, rattling microphones, a desperate percussion to drown out the inevitable. Obama didn't flinch. The folders beside him, sealed in thick manila, pulsed like veins filled with truth, waiting to bleed into the open. He placed one hand on the top folder, the paper stiff, textured like sandpaper against polished wood. He did not open it yet. He only let his fingers rest there, the anticipation heavier than any evidence could be. The room breathed deeper. The air grew hungrier. Trump tried to fill it with noise, but each word sounded thinner, stretched, brittle. Obama sat, steady, and the question lingered across the entire nation. What truth was sealed inside those folders, and whose names would be carved into history when they were opened? The silence hadn't even settled when Obama slid the first folder forward, the faint rasp of cardboard against wood, louder than Trump's last outburst. The seal cracked, and the sound sliced through the chamber like a scalpel through flesh. Pages spilled out, stiff and heavy, ink still dark, as if the truth had been preserved in ice. Obama held one sheet up to the light, its watermark gleaming like a wound that refused to close. "This," he said, his voice so even it felt merciless, "is where $10 million were rerouted. Not for infrastructure, not for health care, not for schools. Straight into the campaign coffers of Donald Trump." His finger tapped once on the page, each strike like a nail into a coffin. Trump sneered, leaning forward as if proximity could erase reality. "Fake. You can wave papers all day, they mean nothing." But his voice cracked, just barely, a hairline fracture across the mask of confidence. Obama didn't blink. "Tell that to Janine Holloway," he continued, his tone sharpened by restraint. The chamber stirred. 39 years old. single mother. Her son, Daniel, diagnosed with leukemia last year. She waited for the assistance your administration promised. Instead, the funding vanished, swallowed whole. 50,000 in medical bills later, she is drowning because 10 million floated into your pockets. The room tightened, air folding inward. Even the cameras seemed to zoom closer on their own, as if compelled by gravity. Trump's grin faltered, his lips twitching into a half-snarl. I don't know her. That's not my responsibility. Obama laid the document flat. You don't have to know her. You just had to not steal from her. The words detonated. Viewers at home gasped audibly. In Kansas, a retired teacher dropped her mug of coffee, hands trembling. In New York, construction workers gathered around a break room screen, some shouting, some going quiet with awe. The line echoed across networks before anchors even repeated it, ricocheting like a bullet with no target but conscience. Trump jabbed a finger across the table, sweat glistening like oil under the lights. You've always been the talker, the lecture giver. Nobody cares about your stage sympathy. People want results, not sob stories. Obama lifted another sheet, this one thinner, edges curling as if the paper itself recoiled from its contents. Results, he said softly, like Leonard Price. 80 years old, 2 tours in Vietnam, promised veteran assistance. He received nothing. He pawned his medals last month to pay for groceries. The chamber groaned with the weight of silence. Trump shifted in his chair, lips pressing tight, his fist beating a staccato rhythm on the desk like a man searching for oxygen. He tried to interject, but Obama raised a single finger, and the interruption died in his throat. Justice doesn't scream, Obama whispered, his eyes locking with Trump's. It documents. The line landed like shrapnel. Across living rooms, families repeated it. Teenagers typed it into group chats. A preacher in Atlanta spoke it aloud to his congregation as if scripture. Trump barked too quickly. You're a fraud, a performer. Nothing but paper and empty lines. His words fell flat, tin against steel. Obama closed the folder with finality, the thud like a gavel sealing fate. He stacked the evidence carefully, each motion deliberate, ritualistic. The papers did not shout. They whispered, breathed, bled truth into the chamber until even the marble seemed to lean closer. The first revelation had been made, but the heavier folders still waited, pulsing like hearts ready to be cut open. And the nation leaned in, breathless, to see which would bleed next. The room was still reeling when Obama's hand slid to the second folder, thicker, heavier, the manila edges warped as though swollen with secrets. He pulled it close, the paper groaning under its own weight, and when he opened it, the sound was less a rustle than a tearing, as though the air itself had been ripped. Photographs spilled across the desk, glossy surfaces catching the sterile light like fresh wounds. These are not numbers, Obama said, voice precise, controlled. These are lives. He lifted one photo, the face of a child staring wide-eyed, oxygen tubes coiled around his nose. Daniel Holloway, age 9. His mother begged for relief that never came. Relief you siphoned into rallies and billboards. He doesn't understand campaign finance, but he knows what it feels like when his chest burns and his mother cries because she cannot pay for medicine. Trump shifted, his bravado cracking further. This is emotional manipulation. This is staged. Kids get sick. It's tragic, but it's not my fault. His words clanged against the chamber's marble, brittle, hollow. Obama set the photo down gently, like it was fragile glass. He opened another page, thick with signatures, contracts, and trails of redirected funds. You redirected $10 million meant for healthcare access into political advertising. 500 families denied coverage. 140 children without treatments. That is not tragic circumstance. That is theft. Trump slammed a palm flat on the table, the microphones rattling. Lies, every word. Manufactured. You've always been the puppet master of fiction. Obama did not raise his voice. He tapped the page. Once. Twice. Each tap was surgical. Truth doesn't need theater. It leaves signatures, dates, paper trails. And every stolen dollar has a name carved into it. The names poured like rainfall from his lips. Martha James, 44, forced to sell her home to afford chemotherapy. Samuel Ortiz, 16, denied life-saving surgery. Grace Williams, 7 years old, buried last April because her mother's request for coverage was stalled into silence. The chamber exhaled in a shudder. Reporters scribbled frantically, their pens like blades cutting through the stillness. Social media feeds erupted in parallel waves. Hashtags forming themselves in real time, though no one had to say them aloud. Viewers typed Daniel's name, Grace's name, Martha's name, until they became national monuments of grief and fury. Trump's jaw quivered. His voice lashed like a whip searching for a target. And where were you, Barack? Where were you to help them? Don't put their blood on me when you could have done more. Obama's reply came without pause, his gaze steady as an executioner's blade. I was not the one who stole from them. You don't steal money. You steal time. You steal years from children. You steal nights from mothers. You steal peace from veterans. And you cannot repay what you took. The words detonated harder than any yell could. A father in Wisconsin clutched his daughter's hand tighter as they watched. A nurse in Miami wiped tears with the back of her glove during a night shift. Churches, schools, diners, all felt the line ripple like an electrical storm. Trump tried to smirk, but it faltered, trembling at the corners. His hand twitched toward his notes, then away, as if even the papers in front of him recoiled from his touch. His armor of noise was splintering, piece by piece. Obama closed the second folder with the same deliberate weight, stacking it atop the first. 2 coffins on the table, waiting for their occupant. Yet another folder remained, thicker than both, pulsing faintly in the fluorescent light, like a heart desperate to confess. And the question that hung, heavier than silence, was this. If the first 2 folders revealed theft and suffering, what did the final one hold that even Trump seemed terrified to face? Before the echoes faded, Obama reached for the final folder. It dwarfed the others, its bulging seams straining against the brass clasp, as if the truth inside wanted to burst free on its own. When he unclasped it, the sound cracked like a gunshot, making Trump flinch visibly for the first time. Papers spilled across the desk, thicker than any indictment, their corners sharp enough to cut. The chamber seemed to shrink, the walls leaning in, the lights exposing every twitch on Trump's face like X-rays. Obama picked up the top sheet with surgical calm. This is not about families denied coverage. This is not just about stolen benefits. This is about where the money went. He held the page high, the seal of a wire transfer gleaming in the light. $10 million, rerouted through shell companies, funneled into luxury properties tied directly to your name. Trump's face flushed red, his neck veins bulging. You can't prove that. I built everything I own. Nobody handed me a dime. His fists pounded the desk, but the sound was smaller now, desperate percussion drowned by the weight of documents breathing against the microphones. Obama let the sheet drop. It landed with a thud sharp enough to slice silence. He drew out another, its edges yellowed, stapled at the corner. Invoice for a gold-plated elevator panel, $300,000, paid with funds earmarked for veterans' hospitals. An elevator for your building instead of treatment rooms for amputees. The chamber gasped as one. The word gold ricocheted through the air like a curse. In living rooms, viewers' mouths hung open. A veteran named Leonard stared at his empty fridge again, this time with tears instead of anger. Trump lunged for the papers, his fingers brushing the table, but Obama pulled them back with surgical precision. His voice dropped lower, colder. You don't want the country to see this, do you? Because these documents don't scream, they whisper. And their whispers say your empire is built on stolen blood. The one-liner detonated like dynamite. Crowds and public spaces watching live feeds erupted in shouts, some pounding tables, others standing in stunned silence. Clips of the phrase cut and replayed within seconds. Students chanting it in dorm rooms, workers repeating it on factory floors. Trump, cornered, spat venom. You're nothing but a performer. You hide behind paper. You've never built anything real. You just talk. His face contorted, hands shaking, sweat dripping onto the desk. Obama leaned forward, his eyes steady, every syllable cutting like a scalpel. Justice doesn't scream, it documents. And every page here is a brick in the monument of your downfall. He began stacking the papers methodically, each one placed like a blade into a sheath. Wire transfers, receipts, contracts, names of intermediaries all laid out in choreography, as elegant as it was merciless. The papers didn't just document theft, They painted a mural of corruption. Every sheet a brushstroke soaked in stolen lives. Trump tried again, his voice shrill. They'll never believe you. I have crowds, I have loyalty, I have fire. Obama stood, the folders stacked like coffins before him. He looked down at Trump, his voice even quieter than before, but heard more clearly than any shout. Fire burns fast. Truth endures. The chamber erupted. Some clapped, some gasped, some simply stared at Trump as his shoulders sagged, the fight draining from his posture. His eyes darted to the cameras, searching for escape, but the documents on the desk glowed like chains binding him in place. And the world waited, breathless, as the weight of evidence prepared to collapse not only a man, but an empire. The chamber quivered as if the marble itself had absorbed the blow. Obama remained standing, the stack of evidence before him glowing beneath the merciless lights. He lifted one sheet from the pile with the care of a surgeon lifting a scalpel. The paper seemed to bleed truth, edges curled, ink glistening like fresh wounds. He read aloud, his voice calm, merciless. Line item transfer, dated July 22, 2023. $2 million withdrawn from veteran healthcare appropriations, deposited into Trump Organization holdings, used to purchase chandeliers. 12 chandeliers, imported crystal, each worth over $150,000. The chamber erupted in gasps. Reporters shouted over one another, their voices jagged with disbelief. Across America, living rooms filled with stunned silence. In Milwaukee, Leonard, 80 years old, his medals gone to the pawn shop, sat motionless, the word chandelier echoing in his mind like a curse. In Atlanta, Janine clutched her son Daniel's hand tighter, whispering, "This is why." Trump lunged to his feet, veins bulging, his voice breaking into ragged screams. "Fake, all fake. You think people care about chandeliers? They want strength, not your pathetic papers." His words cracked, brittle as dried wood snapping underfoot. Obama did not flinch. He laid the invoice flat, smoothing it with his palm, and spoke as though delivering scripture. "You don't steal chandeliers. You steal chemotherapy. You don't steal crystal. You steal childhoods." The line tore through the chamber like shrapnel. Social media feeds detonated, the phrase repeated, clipped, etched onto signs, chanted in protests outside city halls. A teenager in Chicago wrote it in black marker across a cardboard sheet and held it aloft on a busy street. A grandmother in Texas whispered it to her granddaughter, tears streaming down her face. Trump staggered back into his chair, his bluster collapsing into ragged breaths. He tried to snarl, but the sound caught in his throat. His hand trembled as he pointed weakly toward Obama. You're twisting this. People don't care about numbers on paper." Obama leaned closer, his voice soft, his words scalpel sharp. "Numbers on paper are names in cemeteries. They are empty chairs at dinner tables. They are folded flags handed to widows. And you signed every theft with your own pen." The chamber froze. Even the lights seemed to hum quieter, as if the building itself bent to hear him. One by one, Obama lifted more sheets. $3.5 million for golf course renovations, $2.1 million for luxury vehicles, $800,000 for custom suits. Each dollar stolen from hospitals, schools, veterans, families. He stacked them deliberately, a tower of indictment, every page a weight pressing down on Trump's shoulders. Trump buried his face in his hands. Sweat poured from his temples, staining the papers he tried to swipe away. His empire of noise cracked audibly, like stone under hammer. The public collapse was total. On screens across America, children asked their parents why money for hospitals went to chandeliers. Elderly veterans cried openly. Workers cursed through clenched jaws. Communities erupted in fury, their voices spilling into streets, into churches, into schools. The story no longer belonged to the chamber. It belonged to the people. And yet, Obama was not finished. He closed the final folder, with the gravity of a judge delivering a sentence. The sound echoed like a gavel. His eyes, calm as still water, locked onto Trump's hollow stare. History does not forget. And tonight, neither will America. The chamber still vibrated with the echo of Obama's words, when the weight of silence settled like ash after fire. Trump sat collapsed in his chair, his hands trembling, sweat soaking the collar of his suit. His face no longer sneered. It sagged, heavy with the awareness of cameras capturing his unraveling. Obama gathered the folders, stacking them neatly. Their edges were sharp as blades, their spines stiff as gravestones. He didn't need to raise them again. The damage was carved into the nation. He looked across the table, his voice low, deliberate, carrying more force than any shout. Your chandeliers will outlive you, but so will their shadows. And those shadows will belong to Daniel Holloway, to Leonard Price, to Grace Williams, not to you. The names hung in the air, each one a nail in Trump's coffin of credibility. Across the country, lives shifted. In Pittsburgh, Janine Holloway sat on the edge of her son's hospital bed, tears cutting down her cheeks, whispering that maybe, just maybe, the truth had finally found them. In Miami, a nurse named Rosa sent the clip to her coworkers, her text trembling. This is why we fight. In Kansas, Leonard switched off his television, opened his fridge, and found it empty again. But this time, he smiled bitterly, whispering, "Now they all know." Outside the chamber, protesters surged. Signs with Obama's one-liners filled the streets. Truth doesn't need your permission. You don't steal money, you steal time. Justice doesn't scream. It documents. They chanted as if rehearsed, though the words had been spoken only minutes earlier. The slogans' painted walls, echoed in bullhorns, carved themselves into a nation's memory. Reporters fanned out, broadcasting reactions in real time. Anchors described elderly veterans standing outside hospitals with tears in their eyes. Teenagers uploaded clips with the captions, "This is history." Churches across the South rang bells. In Harlem, a mural began overnight, painters brushing Daniel's face beside the words, "You don't steal childhoods." Trump tried one last lunge. His voice cracked, desperate, grasping at the embers of fire. "They'll forget tomorrow. People always forget." His words broke midway, collapsing into a rasp. Obama turned, gathering the folders into his arms, their weight deliberate, almost ceremonial. He paused at the door, looking back only once. His voice was steady, final, unforgettable. Facts are patient. They wait. They endure. And when the shouting dies, they remain. It was the last nail. Trump lowered his gaze, defeated, the cameras framing his collapse as the nation witnessed the end of bluster against preparation. The chamber exhaled, reporters surging forward, the roar of questions filling the space where Trump's voice had once thundered. And outside, across America, something shifted. Families felt seen, workers felt heard, veterans felt vindicated. Children watched and understood that democracy was not noise but evidence. Communities gathered around screens, some weeping, some cheering, all repeating the lines Obama had delivered. By midnight, vigils flickered with candlelight. Mothers held children closer. Elderly men raised flags in trembling hands. Strangers embraced in streets. The story was no longer a confrontation between two men in a chamber. It was a reckoning that reached into kitchens, hospitals, schools, and churches. And in the quiet that followed, one truth emerged brighter than the chandeliers that had stolen lives. Bluster burns out, but facts endure.